Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the world's okayest physical therapist podcast, hosted by me, Dr. H. Today, we're taking a look at episode 2 of the inflammation series. Um, First of all, thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video. That way, everybody can figure out how to better navigate this American healthcare system that we experience and we have to go through on a daily basis. It is labyrinthine, it is Byzantine, which is code word for saying it's outdated and really confusing and full of bureaucracy. And I'm just trying to figure out how to better navigate it myself as a physical therapist and to share that information with you all, as well as sharing fun and interesting and helpful understandings of what might be going on in your body as you are dealing with certain things. Now, as always, um, you need to keep in mind that this is a podcast that is meant for educational purposes. It is not meant to supplement medical advice or seeing a doctor at all. So, let's dive into this episode. But first, I have a link to share with you guys. I'm wearing currently 10,000 shorts, not 10,000 total shorts, but the shorts from the brand 10,000, and they have given me a link to share with you all to get 15% off. So go ahead and check the description and or go to my YouTube channel and check my bio. And there you will find the link to get 15% off my favorite shorts ever. So let us dive back into inflammation. So we're going to go from the microscopic to what we call the macroscopic, going from cell level to tissue level. So last time we talked about cytokines, we talked about cell signaling, we talked about how cells are talking to each other as neighbors, and they're using hormones and cytokines and other things to say, hey, there is trauma near me. I need increased blood flow, increased nutrients. I need the fibroblasts. I need the immune cells to come in and to start cleaning things up. Now, because we talked about that on the cell level, what we have to keep in mind is that this is being replicated millions of times, cell to cell across an entire region, depending on the size of the trauma that a person is experiencing, which means that's a lot of cytokines, that's a lot of hormones, that's a lot of cell signaling, that's a lot of requests for help that the cells are putting out. And when this happens across these millions of cells, that's where we're going to see visible swelling. Now, real quick side tangent on swelling. Yes, when a lot of people exercise, they also get swelling. This is because your body's exercising, your blood vessels are dilating, they're trying their best to get blood into the area for the working muscles to continue to function, because working cells want blood for nutrients and for oxygen. And they also want to get rid of their waste products. So when this happens, when you use specific muscles, that's where the term get swole comes from, is your muscles literally swell as they request increased perfusion of blood. Now this mechanism, basically your blood vessels dilate and they become more leaky, which allows more fluid to get out of them, which is why your muscles get swollen. It's the same principle with inflammation due to injury, but the mechanics are different. The blood vessels will dilate, the leakiness of the blood vessels will increase to allow fluid, nutrients, immune cells, all the above to perfuse out and to begin the remodeling process or deconstruction process, depending on whatever phase you are in. So this swelling is fluid. It's plasma, it's proteins, and it's immune cells. They are leaking out of those blood vessels and into the surrounding tissue in order to assist with either destroying the dead or dying cells, and then they are going to begin after that, because the immune cells are going to go in and determine friend and foe, or healthy versus damaged. They're going to go in and clear that all out to allow for the rebuilding phase. One of the best ways I could probably describe it is saying it's a controlled flood that is designated to create, again, nutrients and cells and proteins into the area to help create a buffer and to bring the building blocks for repair. The fluid doesn't just sit there, though. It changes the actual physical properties of the tissue. One other thing to keep in mind is the swelling and inflammation, which I might touch on here in a minute, also impacts the nerves and the muscles, because with all of these cytokines, with all of these ions, let's say calcium, potassium, all these things out and about, the muscle is going to try its best to do one of two things. It's going to either shut down completely, or it's going to tighten up depending on where the trauma is. One of the reasons why a muscle will tighten up is if it's one that has not been significantly traumatized, it's trying to immobilize the joint and immobilize the tissue to decrease the chance of further injury to the surrounding muscles. So, one of the things that you'll see sometimes is when someone tears an ACL in their knee, the quad will swell, the entire muscle, all the muscles around it will swell, and they'll lock the joint in place as much as they can because on some level, the body recognizes that it has decreased stability in the knee, and it is trying to lock that knee down in order to prevent further mobilization, to decrease the chance of further trauma. The increased inflammation will also change, like I said, the pressure and the viscosity of the tissue, and that's going to also change how the nerves respond. So one of the biggest shifts is this viscosity. It's the thickness and resistance of a fluid in the tissues. Now at rest, you can reach over, you can grab, say, your quad, your hamstring, your bicep, your tricep, and you can feel squishy muscle, right? Or you can feel that it's tight and you have some knots in there. But the idea is that there's a baseline amount of viscosity. There's a decent amount of give in the tissue that allows it to move. And normally the fluid between our tissues is relatively thin. A lot of it's either in the fascia or in bursas. Fascia is the connective tissue that surrounds muscles, for example. It's connective tissue. And it allows the muscles, the fascia, and the nerves to glide smoothly. That's the point of the fluid in them. It's one of the reasons why drinking water is so important, is it allows the fascia and the muscles to stay hydrated to reduce the chance of injury. The fascia loves to hold on to water and fluid. When inflammation comes into the picture and it adds the proteins, it adds plasma, it adds ions, it adds hormones, it adds cytokines, it adds, in some cases, even clotting factors. All of that turns what should be, for lack of a better metaphor, like engine oil or olive oil into something much more akin to syrup, much more akin to thick, gooey, oozy honey, and it doesn't want to move. This increased viscosity has some pretty significant consequences. The thicker fluid in swollen tissue creates a mechanical resistance, which is going to signal to the brain when you try to move a muscle, hey, this is way more difficult than it should be. I'm getting a lot more resistance. Keep in mind that muscles have sensors in them that keep track of pressure. They keep track of resistance. So if the muscle is under a lot of tension when it's at rest, that's going to be sending a signal to the brain saying something is going on here. I'm having an increase in pressure and resistance. And this will make movements feel sluggish and weak. And the brain's going to be a little bit confused by this. It's going to be saying, well, the muscle should be firing normal. What? I don't understand exactly why. I'm sending the same level of neurological input into these muscles, but the movement's not the same. What's going on here? The second thing, so this is where it becomes a double whammy. You have the actual muscle itself being swollen and sluggish, and it's more difficult for it to fire efficiently, which is going to cause sluggish and weak movements. And then on top of this, you're going to have nerve conduction and sensation changes, because now the nerves are surrounded by this fluid. They're surrounded by this syrup, this honey, and it's going to, for lack of a better word, push on them. And when that pushes on them and the pressure builds, the nerves are going to become hypersensitive. And that's where you're going to lead into that burning, that tingling, and that altered sensation, because now you've increased the fluid viscosity. It's not a happy, smooth oil that is allowing lubrication of the muscles to glide and the fascia staying happy and hydrated. It's now a thicker pressure on these nerves, which is going to make them hyper excitable. It's going to make them more likely to fire with a lower threshold of input. It's like the idea that if you took a feather and you brushed your skin right now at rest, and let's say that it was, we're assuming that it's you're a healthy individual with no trauma or anything, you take a feather and you brush that skin, and you're going to be like, oh, that tickles just a little bit. Well, now you have increased trauma, now you've increased viscosity, now you have all these things going, and you do that same thing with a feather, and now the nerves are hyper excited. They're looking for a reason to fire, and that might lead to increased sensation like increased hypersensitivity where it's like, oh, that almost feels painful, that almost feels whatever. But it also leads into the numbness and the tingling, right? Which is one of the things that's most common that you actually will see, for example, in a physical therapy clinic after someone has surgery, is they have decreased sensation for quite a while, because what will happen is, and this is where it could go one of two ways, right? You can have the hypersensitivity, which is everything is hurting all the time, which is gonna be like that deep ache. And then you're also gonna have the I can't feel anything the way that I used to feel it. It feels numbing and tingly. And that's just because, again, the nerves are having pressure on them. So it's a little bit of both, and it depends where. If you're talking about tissue that has been effectively traumatized, that tissue itself is probably going to be more hyper responsive. It's going to feel, or it's going to have a higher likelihood to fire with a lower stimulus. It's going to be hypersensitive and looking for a reason to say that it's in pain because it knows that it's been traumatized. Everything around it, with that increased viscosity, those nerves and their nerve endings might be so filled with pressure that they just feel numb and tingly the whole time, because that's what the nerves are saying back to the brain. They're saying, hey, we're just getting a ton of fluid, a ton of pressure on us. We don't actually feel that much. We just feel the pressure of these surrounding tissues, and that's going to manifest to them as numbness and tingling, right? It can go one of two ways. Trying to keep this short and not turn into an hour-and-a-half long podcast, but suffice it to say, the more acute the trauma, the more likely you're going to have that hypersensitivity, and then the surrounding tissues around that acute trauma are more likely to say, hey, numb, tingling, changing in sensation. Proprioception, that's the body's sense of where it is in time and space. That's also going to be changed because the mechanical receptors in the fascia, in the connective tissue, and in the muscles are also going to be impacted by that increase in viscosity, that increase in pressure, and it's going to interfere with their ability to fire normally, which is going to make it harder to know where that joint is, that muscle is, that body region is in time and space. So basically, takeaway here, that change in viscosity is one of the reasons why it feels heavy, clumsy, and less responsive. That change in fluid consistency literally alters how muscles and nerves do their jobs on a cellular level and on a tissue level. Now, nerves are also going to help protect. They're also going to try and inhibit things. So when the fluid builds up, it puts the mechanical pressure on the nerve endings, like I was talking about, which makes them more sensitive and makes them more likely to fire and send pain signals. But beyond the pain, the nervous system is also going to shut down or inhibit the muscle activation. And there's, again, could be an hour-and-a-half long podcast just on that alone. But what it's basically called is muscle inhibition. And when the nerves are deciding, hey, there is pain, there is trauma, so in order to prevent further injury, like I said earlier, we're just going to shut off the signals going to the area. We're not going to allow that muscle to be used. It's the body's way of saying, hey, this muscle's been traumatized. I'm trying to protect the joint and the muscle, so we're not going to fire as forcefully as we normally could. A really good example is after you have an ankle sprain, the outside of the ankle muscles, they're called they're called several different names. They're called the fibularis muscles or the peroneals. They're usually hard to activate because they get strained. And so what happens is you have this sluggish difficulty of moving your toes up and away, up into the outside, away from midline from your body, because they've been traumatized and strained, and that movement becomes sluggish, which is also one of the reasons why you're more likely to re-roll your ankle. But that's going on because of that swelling, because of that inflammation, and just because of the biochemistry of the nerves themselves. It's a little bit about the pressure. It's also a little bit about the ions and the cytokines and the cell signaling going on at the same time. But between the viscosity and the pressure on the nerve endings, which we talked about, both of those come together and they basically lead to more sluggish and weaker movements because the body's trying to protect itself. But this is all very frustrating. Swelling is frustrating. It feels like it inhibits you from doing what you want to do, because it is. It lasts for quite a long time, especially if you go in and re-injure that tissue. But the design behind it is to cushion the injured area, to prevent further damage by slowing down the rate of muscle activation. And it also alerts the nervous system that something's going on and it needs to restrict movement. It's a built-in cast, in a sense. And that's why when I used the example of the ACL tear earlier, that's what I'm talking about. When you tear the ACL, the entire leg is going to swell up and lock it in place because you're looking at a fluid filled cast. Same thing with your ankle. You roll your ankle, fluid filled cast. It's designed to keep you mobile because if you go back 2,000, 3,000 years, if you twisted your ankle out on a hunt, you twisted your ankle looking for food or running away from a predator, you gotta keep mobile because if you keep mobile, there's a better chance that you survive. If you don't keep mobile, it's chow time and you're on the menu. That's one of the reasons why it's a built-in cast. It's designed to help you keep moving, but it's also going to inhibit those muscles that have been strained. It's the problem in modern society is we have this swelling that tends to linger longer than it should, and a lot of that, in my opinion, is due to diet, level of fitness and exercise, and positioning and activity. We don't walk as much as we used to. Our calves aren't as strong as they used to be. Our calves, keep in mind, are a mechanical pump to get all this fluid back to our heart. So weak calves means weak cycling of fluid, which means that fluid sits around a lot longer. We don't get up and move as much as we used to. Even I, recording this podcast, am sitting here talking to you. I'm not on a treadmill walking. I should probably be walking a lot more throughout the day. Actually, that's not true. In the clinic, I hit my steps every day. I had at least like 2 or 3 miles in the clinic every day. But on the weekends, when I record these, I am not really a couch potato, but I'm feeling a little bit unwell, so I'm a couch potato today. But that being said, I will now not be a hypocrite. I will go back on the treadmill and do some steps after this. But we get more steps in historically. We were more fit historically. We're now industrialized. We sit. We don't use our calves. We don't move. This leads to the fluid sitting and hanging out in our tissues longer. It doesn't cycle through, and that can lead to prolonged inflammation. Now, how does physical therapy impact this, and how does it matter? 1, movement. And it's the correct movement. That's what physical therapy is good at, is seeing you, evaluating you, and helping give you a personalized idea of what you should be doing within the movement that you can do that's pain-free. Isometrics, which create that muscular pumping action without overloading that tissue. It also helps calm down the nerves, because when the nerves feel that pressure and that pull, but they recognize it's not painful and excessively strain a tissue, that drives a conversation between the muscles and the brain to say, oh, this movement's not painful, this is tolerable, I can now lower my threshold of excitability and expecting what's painful, I can do this motion. So it's a little bit of neuro conversation going on between the muscle and the brain. And then soft tissue mobilization can improve fascial glide, reduce stiffness, and reduce the viscosity, which is one of the reasons why when you go into a physical therapy clinic and they're very hands-on and they do that soft tissue mobilization, what they're effectively trying to do, whether they know it or not, is they're speaking the language of pressure to your body. And when they're speaking the language of pressure, they're also changing the viscosity of the tissue around the injury site. And by changing that viscosity from sticky honey to a nice moving oil, either through heat and through techniques, that's going to decrease that pressure, which now you can see moving backward, changing the viscosity, increasing the amount of fluid returning to the heart, driving down inflammation. All of that's going to do what? It's going to improve what we were talking about. So this has been the tissue level story of inflammation and how fluid changes viscosity, what makes the muscles and nerves behave differently, and why swelling makes an area feel weak, heavy, and sometimes numb. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at some of the more powerful but underappreciated tools in physical therapy, such as like isometric exercise, how that impacts blood flow. We'll probably take a look at soft tissue mobilization and things like that. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the link to 10,000. They're amazing. They got pants, shorts, and t-shirts. I think they even have some fitness gear on there. Now, everybody stay healthy, stay fit, and stay awesome, and I will catch you all in the next episode.